There is a specific kind of grief in the used car market, not the grief of buying a bad car, the grief of knowing what a car used to be and seeing what it became. Every car on this list was, at a specific point in its production history, one of the best examples of what a car could be. Reliable beyond expectation, dependable across high mileage, resistant to the kind of failure that costs serious money and erodes trust. Every car on this list is also, at a later point in its production history, something considerably more complicated, considerably less robust, and in several cases a genuine liability at the used market prices the badge commands. This is not a video about bad cars. It is a video about decisions. The decisions manufacturers made when they added complexity they did not need, chased regulatory compliance at the expense of mechanical simplicity, or replaced engineering that worked with engineering that is harder to service, harder to diagnose, and harder to trust at high mileage. For each car, we have specified the generation that earned the reputation and the generation that spent it, because the name is not the car. And in every case on this list, a significant proportion of buyers are paying for a reputation that belongs to an older version of the vehicle they are actually purchasing. Car number 1, the Volkswagen Golf. The generation that earned the reputation, Mark IV and Mark V, roughly 1997 to 2009. The Golf Mark IV is not an exciting car. It is a very well-built car. The cabin is solid in a way that still holds up 25 years on. The switchgear is precise. The 1.8T petrol engine, turbocharged, characterful, and well understood, has aged remarkably well in the hands of owners who have maintained it correctly. The 1.9 TDI diesel is one of the most proven diesel engines in the history of the European mass market. Simple in concept, well supported by the independent network, and capable of reaching 300,000 kilometers in routine use when correctly serviced. Independent mechanics who have worked on this engine across 2 decades are not working through unknown territory. They know this engine, and they can fix what fails. The Mark V continued this engineering confidence. The 2.0 TDI and the naturally aspirated 1.4 are honest engines. They are not exciting, they are dependable, and at the age these cars have now reached in the used market, that is the more important quality. The generation that spent the reputation, Mk7 and Mk8, from 2013 onwards. The Golf Mark 7 is not a bad car. By most metrics, it is a better car than the Mark IV. More refined, more economical, more technologically capable. But it is also a car where the transition to the MQB platform, the proliferation of direct injection petrol engines prone to inlet valve carbon buildup, the introduction of the DSG gearbox into the mass market, and increasingly complex ADAS systems have created an ownership profile that is substantially more expensive to maintain and more vulnerable to specific failure modes than the generation that built the Golf's reputation. The Mk8 from 2020 onwards continued this trajectory with the addition of a fully software-dependent interface that, in its early production versions, was the subject of more software-related complaints than perhaps any other mass-market model sold in the UK in its period. The Golf badge is the same. The engineering philosophy behind it has changed fundamentally since the generation that earned it the trust it still commands. If you want a Golf for reliability, buy a Mark IV or Mark V with a documented service history and a known mileage. They are available in the used market, and they deliver what the reputation suggests. The Mk7 and Mk8 are different cars with a shared name. Car number 2, the BMW 3 Series, the generation that earned the reputation, E36 and E46, 1990 to 2005. The E46 in particular is the car that established the 3 Series as the definitive compact executive saloon. Not because it was especially reliable, it had its share of known issues, including cooling system vulnerabilities that became well understood with time, but because the engineering philosophy behind it was mechanical rather than electronic. The straight-six engines in the E46 are physically large, well understood, and relatively straightforward to work on. The suspension geometry is sophisticated but not overcomplicated. A competent independent mechanic with time and the right reference material can address almost anything on an E46 without manufacturer-specific tools or proprietary software. The generation that spent the reputation, F30 and G20, from 2012 onwards. The F30 is a technically capable car. The turbocharged 4- and 6-cylinder engines are economical and performant. But the shift to turbocharged units across the entire range, with the associated timing chain issues on early N20 and N26 engines, the thermostat vulnerabilities, and the significant increase in electronic complexity, created an ownership cost curve that catches buyers who purchase on the basis of the 3 Series reputation without understanding that the reputation was built on a mechanically different vehicle. The G20 from 2018 continued the electronic complexity with ADAS systems, suspension electronics, and a software-driven interface that requires manufacturer tooling for an increasing number of diagnostic and programming functions that an independent would previously have carried out without issue. The 3 Series name carries weight. Among knowledgeable used car buyers, the weight is almost entirely associated with the E46. The F30 and G20 are technically accomplished cars that carry that weight without always deserving it. Car number 3, the Honda Civic, the generation that earned the reputation 6th and 7th generations, 1995 to 2005. These are the Civics that built Honda's reliability reputation among people who understand what that word means in practice. The 1.4 and 1.6 VTEC engines are, by any reasonable measure, among the most proven small to medium petrol engines of their era. Simple in design, high in manufacturing quality, and resistant to the kind of age-related degradation that turbocharged units develop from around 80,000 miles onwards. There are no cooling system compromises, no chain-driven timing issues to worry about at this mileage, and no intake valve carbon buildup, because the fuel washes the ports on these port injection engines in a way it cannot on a direct injection unit. The switchgear is straightforward. The interior is functional rather than impressive. These are qualities that, at high mileage and high age, reveal their value in the absence of costs that other cars generate. The 6th generation, 1995 to 2000, established the pattern. The 7th generation, 2001 to 2005, refined it. The EP3 Type R that closed the 7th generation carries a naturally aspirated K20A2 engine that is, among independent mechanics in the UK, considered one of the most reliable performance-oriented engines of its size ever fitted to a mainstream car. Independent mechanics who specialize in Japanese cars encounter these engines at 250,000 miles with no internal work ever performed and with compression figures that would embarrass many engines half the mileage. The generation that spent the reputation, 10th and 11th generations, from 2017 onwards. Car number 4, the Land Rover Defender. The old Defender is not a comfortable car. It is not a quiet car, a refined car, or a technologically sophisticated car. It is a car that will drive through water that would stop a conventional vehicle, that can be repaired in a field with basic tools by someone who has never seen the inside of a workshop, and that has a mechanical complexity roughly equivalent to a mid-century tractor. It is the car that governments, aid organizations, and experienced off-road operators have used across some of the world's most demanding environments precisely because when it goes wrong, and it will go wrong, a competent person with common tools can fix it. The Defender community that built the model's reputation is passionate about exactly this. Not the badge, the philosophy, the repairability, the mechanical honesty of a vehicle that does not require a laptop to diagnose a faulty sensor. The generation that spent the reputation, L663, from 2020. The new Defender is a genuinely capable and impressive vehicle. Land Rover's engineers have built something that is competitive with or superior to the old model on almost every objective metric: performance, comfort, off-road capability, safety. It is also a vehicle of bewildering electronic complexity. The new Defender has more lines of software code than the average airliner. It has sensors, cameras, and control systems that the original Defender's owners would recognize as belonging to a fundamentally different philosophy of engineering. There is nothing wrong with the new Defender as a car. There is something significant to note about it as a successor to the old one. The new Defender cannot be repaired in a field by a competent person with common tools. It requires proprietary manufacturer software for an increasing number of diagnostic and programming tasks. When its electronics fail, and at high mileage they will, the independence that was central to the original vehicle's appeal is not available to the owner. The old Defender's buyers understood that they were choosing a philosophy. The new Defender's buyers are choosing a badge. Those are not the same thing. Car number 5, the Nissan Navara, the generation that earned the reputation D22, 1997 to 2004. If you have spent time in industries that use working trucks, construction, agriculture, utilities, off-road services, you will have encountered the D22 Navara, or you will have encountered the people who used one for 10 years and replaced it with another. The D22 is not a complex vehicle. The 2.5 diesel engine is robust, well supported by independent specialists, and carries the kind of real-world mileage credibility that manufacturers achieve only when the engineering is honest rather than optimized for a test cycle. The D22 in working service across the UK was genuinely bulletproof in the sense that matters for a working vehicle. It was reliable enough, it was fixable when it failed, and the cost of keeping it running was proportionate to the work it did. Independent mechanics who work on these vehicles report that the D22, correctly maintained, is among the most dependable working vehicles sold in the UK market of its era. It did not have complicated electronics to fail, it did not have DPF systems to block, it did not have a chassis that cracked under normal working loads. The generation that spent the reputation D40 and D23, 2005 onwards. The D40 Navara introduced a chassis failure mode that became one of the most documented structural issues in the UK pickup truck market of the last 20 years. The chassis can crack at specific points, around the front leaf spring hanger on both sides, and in some cases at the rear frame sections, on vehicles subjected to the kind of working use that pickup trucks are purchased and sold for. This is not a fringe fault affecting a small percentage of vehicles. It is a structural failure documented across enough UK examples to generate independent mechanic bulletins, owner association guidance, and a substantial volume of online evidence from operators who discovered the crack when it was already significant. Car number 6, the Mercedes C-Class, the generation that earned the reputation W202 and W203. 1993 to 2007. The W203 C-Class is the car that established the compact Mercedes as a genuinely dependable vehicle for high-mileage private and fleet use. These cars have a reputation among independent Mercedes specialists for reaching very high mileages with correct maintenance and for being, by the standards of their era, not especially expensive to keep in good condition. The 1.8 compressor petrol and the 220 CDI diesel are engines that specialists know well, that parts are available for at realistic prices, and that do not require proprietary manufacturer diagnostic tools for the majority of maintenance and repair tasks. The generation that spent the reputation, W205 and W206, 2014 onwards. The W205 is a significantly better car by most objective measures. It is quieter, more refined, more fuel efficient, more technologically capable. It is also a car where the electronics and software architecture have reached a level of complexity that creates a meaningful gap between what a specialist independent can address and what requires Mercedes-specific dealer tooling and software access. The MBUX infotainment system, introduced in 2018 and fitted to W206 and updated W205 models, is capable and innovative. It is also a significant additional layer of electronic complexity on a vehicle that when the W203 was sold, a trained independent could service and repair with minimal manufacturer-specific resources. The W206 is not a bad car. But the W202 and W203 earned the Mercedes reputation for durability with engineering that the W205 and W206 have incrementally moved away from. An independent Mercedes specialist in the UK will tell you that the complexity curve has been rising consistently across this brand for a decade. They can still service the cars, the scope of what they can do independently, and the cost of what requires dealer intervention has shifted. Car number 7, the Range Rover, the generation that earned the reputation, Range Rover Classic and P38, 1970 to 2002. We are not suggesting the P38 was flawless. Anyone who has owned a Range Rover P38 will tell you that it was not. The air suspension, the electrics, and the complexity of the GEMS and Thor engine management systems created their share of challenges. But the engineering under the complexity was fundamentally sound and, critically, well understood by specialist independent operators who could address almost everything the car required. The generation that earned the specific trust of serious off-road users and high-mileage private buyers, the L32 third generation from 2002 to 2012, refined this further with the BMW-sourced engines, particularly the TD6 diesel and the supercharged petrol V8 sourced from Jaguar, that delivered both performance and real-world durability when correctly maintained. The generation that spent the reputation, L405 from 2012, the L405. Range Rover is by every measure a more capable and refined vehicle than the L322. It is also a vehicle where the air suspension is standard equipment across most specifications, where the electronics are substantially more complex, and where the cost of addressing significant mechanical or electronic failure is substantially higher. The L405's known failure modes, air suspension compressor failures, transfer case issues, door handle actuator failures, infotainment system malfunctions, are not individually unusual for a vehicle of its complexity. What makes them significant is the cost of addressing them on a vehicle that commands the prices used L405s trade at, and the specific expectation of durability that the Range Rover name carries, an expectation built partly on the reputation of vehicles that were both simpler and less expensive to maintain when they required attention. The L405's known failure modes, air suspension compressor failures, transfer case issues, door handle actuator failures, infotainment system malfunctions, are not individually unusual for a vehicle of its complexity. What makes them significant is the cost of addressing them on a vehicle that commands the prices used L405s trade at, and the specific expectation of durability that the Range Rover name carries, an expectation built partly on the reputation of vehicles that were both simpler and less expensive to maintain when they required attention. Car number 8, the Toyota Land Cruiser, the generation that earned the reputation 80 Series and 100 Series, 1990 to 2007. Few vehicles in the history of motorized transport have earned a reliability reputation as consistently and as specifically as the Toyota Land Cruiser in its 80 and 100 series generations. These are vehicles that have been used, not tested, used across some of the world's most remote and demanding environments by organizations that cannot afford to lose a vehicle because it has failed. The UNHCR, the ICRC, and their operational counterparts have operated Land Cruisers in environments where vehicle failure is not an inconvenience, it is a life safety issue. They have continued to use Land Cruisers because the Land Cruiser has earned that use. The engineering that underlies this reputation is the 1HZ and 1HD diesel engines, simple in concept, massively over-engineered in execution, and designed to continue operating in conditions that would disable more modern powertrains. The 100 series adds the more sophisticated 1HD-FTE turbo diesel without fundamentally changing the engineering philosophy. The generation that will be tested, 300 series, from 2021. The 300 series Land Cruiser replaces the 200 series twin-turbocharged diesel V8, which itself carried some of the 100 series reputation forward with a more complex but well-proven engine family, with a new twin-turbocharged V6. The V35A-FTS engine is a significant engineering achievement. It is also, as of the time of this script, a relatively young engine family that has not yet accumulated the kind of high-mileage operational evidence that the 1HZ and 1HD accumulated across decades of demanding use. We are not suggesting the 300 series will be unreliable. Toyota's engineering culture and manufacturing quality make that outcome unlikely. But we are noting that the reputation the Land Cruiser name carries was built on specific mechanical foundations that the 300 series has replaced with newer, more complex, more powerful, and less proven equivalents. The 200 series, still available in the used market at this time, carries more of that proven engineering lineage than the 300 series yet can claim. There is a version of this story that applies to almost every car on this list. The reputation was built on simplicity. The simplicity was replaced by complexity. The complexity has not yet failed or has failed in specific and documented ways or cannot be assessed because the vehicle is too new. And the badge, which was earned by the simple version, continues to command the trust that the simple version built. That is the pattern this list exists to name. 8 cars, 8 generational transitions. In every case, the same direction of travel, from simple, durable, independently serviceable engineering toward complex, refined, technology-dependent vehicles that are better by most conventional metrics and more expensive and more complicated to maintain when they require attention. This is not a case against progress. Modern cars are safer, cleaner, more economical, and more capable than the generations that preceded them. These are real improvements. What this is a case for is specificity. If you are buying a used car on the strength of a reputation, identify the generation that earned it, not just the name. The generation, the engine, the year range. The specific combination that produced the ownership experience the reputation describes. The Golf's reputation was built in the Mark IV and Mark V. The 3 Series belongs to the E46. Honda's reliability narrative is the 6th and 7th generation Civic. The Defender's character is the original design philosophy. The Navara's working credibility is the D22. The C-Class durability was established in the W202 and W203. The Range Rover Specialist's confidence belongs to the L322 era, and the Land Cruiser's unmatched operating record was built on the 80 and 100 series. Those are the cars the names describe. The names have not changed, the cars have. Tell us in the comments, is there a car on this list where you owned both the old version and the new, and noticed the difference? Or a car not on this list where the manufacturer made the same decision and took something great in the wrong direction? Tell us the generation, the car, and what changed, because those accounts are exactly the kind of real-world knowledge the used car market needs more of.